God knows. God knows. Tell your neighbor, God knows. Tell somebody else, neighbor, God knows. Give the Lord some praise. You know, there are times in our lives, if we can be brutally honest with ourselves, when we question whether or not God actually knows what we're going through. I know we sing in church songs such as Jesus knows all about our struggles, but if we stay true to ourselves for just a moment, there are things that happen in our lives that make us wonder if God saw that coming, and if he saw it coming, why didn't he give me a little heads up? We've been conditioned by our church tradition with the motto, you don't question God. Has anybody heard that before? But I will tell you this truth. I will be transparent. I'll be the first to admit that there have been times in my life when I looked up to heaven and I said, God, where are you? Times where I lifted up my head and said, God, don't you see what's happening? There have been nights that I stayed up saying, God, I'm struggling, sinking, I'm hurting, I'm falling, I'm slipping. Can I get a witness? Is there anybody here who knows what I'm talking about? Times in our lives when issues and problems are pounding at us and we don't know what to do. As soon as we get one phone call with bad news, here comes the other phone call. As soon as the doctor gives us a bad report, here comes the mailman with more bad news. As soon as we get our house in order, here comes another storm that threatens to rock us to our very foundation. As soon as we pay that bill, here comes another financial crisis, eating into our savings. As soon as one of our kids start acting right, the other one starts acting a fool. As soon as we get our relationship back on track, here comes the Tyler Perry drama. But as real as our realities may be at that given time, I want to give you a word of comfort, hope, and assurance. God has never left you. In those seasons of your life when you thought it was bad, you thought it was so bad it would never get any better, God was there with you. It never was, has been, or will be God's intention to leave you hanging when times get tough. As a matter of fact, the Apostle Paul tells us that his strength is made perfect in our weakness. In other words, it's like that Footprints poem. When you couldn't do it for yourself, it was God right there doing it for you. You see, in that poem, the writer reflected on his walk with God. He began to notice that when he was at his worst and times were terrible, he only saw one set of footprints in the sand. He asked God, when everything was going crazy, see, I'm paraphrasing, where were you? And God replied, don't you know when you couldn't make it on your own, it was me who carried you. I knew you were in trouble and I picked you up. And if I am correct, the word tells us that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. Why would he leave the comforts of heaven to dwell with and die with us and for us? I'll tell you why. He loves us. You see, because he loves us, he won't leave us. Because he knows what we go through, he won't leave us. Because he knows how Satan desires to destroy us, he won't leave us. And here we have in this biblical narrative of Exodus, another example of God's staying power in regards to the suffering of his people. In the text, we find that God is calling Moses for a mission. He's calling Moses for the seemingly impossible task of freeing the Israelites from 430 years of captivity, according to Exodus 12:4. And while the calling of Moses has been glamorized by Hollywood, studied repeatedly by seminarians, and taught countlessly in Sunday school class, we have to remember God's disclaimer in the calling of Moses. Before God asked Moses to do anything, he informed Moses that he saw what his people were going through. Before God asked Moses to speak a word to Pharaoh, he told Moses that he had indeed heard the cries of his people. Before Moses was to perform any miracle or usher in any of the 10 plagues on Egypt, God said, Moses, I am coming down myself and I'm going to free my people. And if we're to take God at his word, and and not just read this text as another interesting and fictional tale, we can come to the conclusion that the same God who saw the pain of the Israel, he sees our pain as well. The same God who heard the cries of the Israelites, he hears our cries and prayers as well. The same God who cared so much about what was happening to the Israelites, that he was compelled to come down and act, is the same God who loves and cares about us and is moving on our behalf as well. You see, one of the things we have to do, we have to take this thing and take it off of the pages of the Bible and say, that means me too. You see, we can read all 66 books of the Bible and think that it was meant for somebody else. But see, I like to personalize this thing. That if I read it in the Bible, that means it applies to me. If he's going to bless somebody in the Bible, he can bless me too. If he's going to deliver somebody in the Bible, I'm next in line. If he can heal somebody in the Bible, come on, that means there's no pain and no hurt, no suffering that God can't deliver me from. If he did it for somebody else, he can do it for me too. Tell your neighbor he can do it for you. We got to stop reading the Bible like it's some feel-good story. Like God stopped doing those things back then. He's doing the same things right now. I want to tell somebody that God was and is in the blessing business. God was and is in the healing business. God was and is in the delivering business. Can I get a witness? Do I have any delivered people here that can testify that God showed up? Oh, yeah, we were showing up. Yes, I did. He showed up, delivered you. He showed up, healed you. He showed up, blessed you. He showed up, worked you out. God is still in the blessing business. He's not stuck to the confines of the Old Testament, and he's not stuck to the confines of the New. God is moving in 2015, and if you just open yourself to what God is doing, God is willing and able to do a miracle in your life. So on this day, I just want to make 3 points from this text that will bless your spirits and encourage your hearts. First of all, I want to let you know that God sees what you're going through. Don't think for a minute that the things you're going through are going unnoticed by God. Each and every trial you face is under the watchful eye of the Lord. You see, there's these two people that wrote a song. You may not know their name, but I know you know the song. Sevilla Martin and Charles Gabriel. They wrote a song called His Eye is on the Sparrow. His eye is on the sparrow. And they hit the nail on the head when they wrote that song. Every trial you face, don't you know God is watching? Every storm you go through, God is watching. Every act of cruelty we endure, God is watching. Every injustice that's done against you, God is watching. Every tear that rolls down your face and hits your pillow at night, God is watching. Every time we experience the unthinkable, the unbearable, God is watching. Tell your neighbor, God sees what you're going through. Don't think for a minute that God gets caught off guard. God is watching and God is putting his plan in motion of deliverance. All he asks us to do is just stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. You know, back in the day, my grandma used to say something to me about talking out of turn. She used to say, don't talk out of turn. In other words, don't open your mouth before it's time. You see, God is telling us don't act out of turn. You stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Don't go out there on your own trying to fix your own problem. Don't try to move before God. Don't try to act before God. You just stand firm like a tree planted by the rivers of water and watch God work. God sees what you're going through. And more than that, God hears what you're going through. See, we can look at this in 2 ways. First, God hears your prayers and your cries. I want to just encourage somebody who's been praying and praying and you think that God just put you on mute. I want to encourage somebody who's been praying and praying and you think God's not paying attention. God hears every prayer uttered from your mouth. As a matter of fact, before you formed the words on your lips, before they got through your vocal cords, before they hit your esophagus, God heard your prayer. Whatever keeps you up at night, standing in pillows with tears, God hears you. Whatever keeps you on your knees praying for a breakthrough, God hears you. I don't know about you, but there are some things that keep me both in loud and silent prayer. Things that happen in my life that force me to go on bended knee and pray, but I'm encouraged with this: God hears my prayers. Paul tells us to pray without ceasing with all kinds of prayers. And you know what? God hears every bit of it. Sometimes we think that God doesn't hear us or that the heavenly hotline is busy. But the songwriter says he hears our faintest cry and he answers by and by. Now, the second way we can look at this is that not only, and I love this one, Keith, I love this one, that God not only hears our cry, but he hears what's being said about us.
All right now.
You know I gotta stay here for a minute.
All right.
Tell your neighbor, God heard it. Tell him again, God heard it. Oh, tell him one more time, God heard it. Every piece of slander, gossip, and innuendo that's coming your way, God heard it all. So the next time somebody tells you some junk somebody supposedly said about you, you tell them God heard it too. The next time somebody wants to talk about this, that, or the other, you tell them God is listening. Before the sting of gossip hits your ears, my brothers and sisters, I want you to know God heard it first. If you want to stop a conversation where it stands, and somebody comes to you saying, well, somebody said this about you, you let them know God is listening as well. You see, God told Moses, not only do I see what's going on, I hear what's going on too. God hears every plan the enemy wants to use against you. God hears every jealous lie being told about you. God hears it all. Tell your neighbor, God hears it all. Don't get upset when somebody says, oh, somebody said something about you. Don't you realize that God is also in this walk with you? God is journeying with you. God is like hand in hand, walking this pilgrim's walk with you. So the next time somebody want to say what somebody said, tell them they got to deal with God first, because God heard it first. God sees what's going on. God hears what's going on. And thirdly, I want to encourage you with this. God cares about what you're going through. And guess what? Personally moves on your behalf. You see, in the text, God told Moses, I've seen what my people are going through. I've heard what they're going through. And the text said in verses 7 and 8, and now I'm coming down myself to handle the situation. You see, God may have called Moses. He may have sent Moses. But make no mistake about it, it was God who's going to handle the business. Let me make this plain. Without God, Moses would not have been able to do a thing. No locusts, no frogs, no flies, no plague of the firstborn, nothing. God worked through a human vessel, but it was God who worked it out. God saw and heard what was going on with his chosen. And in his time, he rescued them through the availability of Moses. One of the things we have to understand is that we all have an appointed time. We all have a time. The Bible tells us in Ecclesiastes, there's a time for everything under the sun. There's a season for everything. You may be in a season of waiting for God to do something in your life. But don't you realize you also have a time of deliverance? You see, we're stuck in linear time. So we see across time as a prism. But God is walking in the infinite. He can see everything and he knows everything. And God already has your day of retrieval where he's going to snatch you from the hand of the enemy. You see, you may not see it, but you just have to be still and know that God is working on your behalf. And there's an expiration date on your suffering. Oh, you missed that. You may